future is, but it'll never be our past. Even distance in your world will never ever change the past. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Oh, we did it again. There we go. Hey, everybody. How you doing? It's Fight Club Hubs. Welcome to another episode of GVN Live, weekly until September 10th, which is our 25th or 20th anniversary of the Dreamcast. So, today we are going to be talking about some stuff that just happened in the past week, which has been very newsworthy. As of today, two things happened. Insomniac was purchased by Sony, and then Game Informer just had half its staff laid off, along with another 100 employees being let go from GameStop. Is the end of times near for GameStop? We'll probably have a talk about that too. As well, we are going to be doing our S4 segment, which is pretty much talking about whether or not a particular game franchise deserves to get a reboot, sequel, starting over, or whatever. Mark can explain that a little bit more in detail when we begin. And the game of choice we are talking about is Wing Commander, as picked by Jan, which is one of my favorite franchises, and sadly one that I really want to touch on too later. And the last topic of today is Square Enix getting some death threats. So yeah, in the light of the anime studio getting burnt down to a crisp, Square Enix got one but two death threats in the past 3 weeks, which is very alarming, and we will definitely talk about that in a little bit. But first, we are going to start off with GameStop and Game Informer. So, excuse me. Game Informer was one of my favorite magazines growing up. My first issue was, I believe, the Nintendo 64 launch. It was the first issue I got when we moved back into the States from Germany in 1995. It was like, I got it like in 1990.
Around that long? That's crazy.
They've been around since 1994, I believe, because the issue I got was like was either early issue 30 or a late issue 20. So somewhere around that time frame, and it had a review of Mario 64. They were talking about the PlayStation. They were talking about the Sega Saturn. It was a small magazine too. It was like maybe 30 pages, just like double the size of a normal comic book. And of course, throughout the years, some people have come and gone with the magazine, but the two main staples of that show was Andy McNamara and Andrew Rayner, and they have been with them to this day. I actually eventually unsubscribed from Game Informer about 4 or 5 years ago, mainly because the quality just wasn't there anymore. With the constant changing of personnel, I couldn't get attached to writers anymore, and what writers they were bringing in, I felt were extremely amateurish in the way they were reviewing their games. One of the things that really put me over the edge was a review for Paper Mario, and how they reviewed it poorly because the game was too childish for them. And I just was just like, huh? That I would say I hung on for about maybe another 3 or 4 years after that. Outside of that, though, Game Informer has gone down in terms of its subscription rate. It was one of the highest subscribed gaming publication magazines for several years, as a matter of fact. And then, about 6-7 years ago, it started a slow decline, with the past couple of years having a very steep decline. And most of that is usually attributed to, GameStop's troubles. So, with that, let's ask you a question, Jan. What do you think was most likely the culprit here in regards to Game Informer's loss of subscription? Do you think it's the quality? Do you think it was the parent company influencing them way too much? What do you think is the outcome as to why they started hitting hard times these last few years?
It's So the idea behind what Game Informer was doing originally was that they had two different variations. When you got your membership, you had the ability to either get a physical copy of it or a digital copy of it. And more people started opting for the digital version of it, which is fine because it's basically just a PDF version that you get in your inbox. The issue here is that cost was the big factor behind a lot of why this happened. GameStop is losing money by the day, and this is the biggest way for them to get rid of these sorts of costs that they don't have to worry about paying writers and printing costs and worrying about whether or not they're going to need to convert it and dealing with that labor. It's just a lot of this is crazy. Like, I was looking at some of the stuff on Twitter and some of the articles just recently in the last, hour or so, and not only did one of their chief video editors get laid off, their senior editor-in-chief got laid off. Not like the primary guy, but like the second in command basically got let go. On vacation, I might add.
Mm-hmm. I saw that tweet too.
Like,
it was sad.
Yeah. He's, yeah, so that's a thing. I'm just sort of surfing through Twitter right now, and it's just the trending is craziness. I sort of saw something like this coming, I think. I know that there was actually some articles and some stuff that people were talking about the fact that Game Informer was actually looking for interns. Like, they were hiring on interns, but they're all unpaid. So it's like, oh yeah, no, we'll just get rid of the paid staff and have non-paid people work for the magazine, which is like, this is the easiest way to cut costs. It's also the biggest way to, easiest way to be a dick. So I don't, that's a big fucking yikes for me. I don't know. I stopped caring about a lot of video game journalism probably 2004, 2005, because a lot of it became real biased when it came to specific games.
Oh yeah, there was definitely a strong sense of that. But I saw a lot of that coming out into forefront late 2000s, early 2010s. And that's probably when I started falling off from game journalism as well.
And I think a lot of it just is like, I didn't care about the magazine. And I think I share a sentiment that a large majority of the gamers and the player base that were continuing to use GameStop were probably in the same mind. They go, they sell, they buy, they leave. They don't care. They get the membership because they know they get extra credit, but that's really the only reason they have it. They don't care about the magazine subscription. They don't care about what's in it. They don't, like, there's nothing exclusive about it anymore. There's nothing extra that you get with it anymore. I mean, I remember back in the mid and late 90s, you'd get a PSN or a PC Gamer and you got a demo disc, and you cared about the magazine because you cared about the demo disc.
Mm-hmm.
When the demo disc became sort of a thing of the past and they just stopped doing it, or people just kept stealing it instead of buying the magazine, they just wanted the disc. It got to a point where it's like, what's the fucking point? Why do I care? I don't really care about the demo disc. And with internet becoming more and more of a way of being, like, the internet was getting faster, it was becoming more prevalent for high speed, not as many people were on dial-up, and demo discs weren't really a big deal anymore. And all of a sudden now you've got the ability to go onto the website, click a link, and get a demo through a launcher or through your friends, and it's like, don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, a lot of the magazines that did that kind of stuff just stopped printing altogether. And it got to a point where, as everything moved more and more towards news versus news journalism, like, people just want headlines. Nobody cares about the whole article anymore. Some people do. Please don't get me wrong. But I would point you in the direction of Shoryuken. It's having a sort of an identity crisis right now as well. SRK is very dead right now in terms of actual journalism because
what was once
basically
the
the
most
same
flourishing
thing.
like FGZ site on the planet, also the highest like activity in terms of like a forum I've ever seen, and I would have to say once Facebook took off, it kind of died.
I mean, only up until just the last couple of years. I'd say probably about 3 or 4 years, SRK was still like the go-to site. People would still post things. People would still forum stuff. People would still use it. When people really started getting into just the last couple of years with Discord and Facebook, like it all fell away. Like having the ability to be able to instantly communicate with people in an environment that's conducive to gaming in a positive way in terms of connectivity, Discord just made more sense. And it's sort of the same way for me, because I'm like, if I can get to somebody right away, then that means I can get matches quicker, that means I can get games quicker, that means I can get groups quicker, that means I can get information quicker, because people are still hitting up the social media pages that are basically the only things that are being updated right now by any of the people that actually matter when it comes to those sorts of things. So for me personally, a lot of this was just it became about, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, just in base, it turned into, I don't really need to read articles that are 4 or 5 pages long about something that I can get off of Twitter in about 15, 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't make any sense. And I think this is just an evolution. It's a natural way of things going on.
Oh, sorry to hear that, Rob.
Ooh, that sucks, Rob.
Yeah.
Welcome anyway.
One of the things that I would say has managed to allow Game Informer to stay live for so many years was something I don't really see gaming magazines do anymore, or not as often, and that is the exclusive story around certain games, or the timed exclusive story revolving a game. Like, they had, I mean, yeah, sure, we had the announcement of Iceborne about a few months ago, but then, like, the following month for Game Informer, they had an entire story, like 6 or 7 page spread in regard for more in-depth detail about Monster Hunter Iceborne, which you couldn't get right away. And Game Informer has pretty much been the king of getting exclusive stories for like details like that for interviews and games and whatnot. Of course, that's also what led to many accusations, including, you know, bullshit involving Gamergate, saying that they were paying gaming companies or to you know, get all these exclusive rights for stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I mean, you get something that someone's going to want to read, they're still going to come and read it, but I think at this point in time now, people are just like, you know what, no one's really doing this stuff anymore, so we're just going to go where everybody else is going, which is, let's go online to Silicon Era, let's go online to Kotaku, let's go online to, you know, so many other websites like Games Radar, which is somehow still around. How about you, Mark? What are your thoughts about this whole thing? Do you think Game Informer has a chance to, let's say, survive in the aftermath of GameStop's downfall? Like, do you think they might be sold to another another publication like Ziff Davis?
Oh, they'll probably be sold in some capacity or another. Do I think they're going to survive? Fuck no. Like, this is the thing, right? Print magazines for gaming news are kind of a thing of the past. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but it basically boils down to the methods by which information is revealed and the speed at which it can be revealed have been changed dramatically with the invention of the internet, social media, things of that nature. So back during the 80s and the 90s, video game magazines were the only way you got information on video games. Like, that was it. There was a lot of competition between these different magazines to be the people brokering, like, breaking stories, rather, about particular games, about particular consoles, about particular companies, whatever. With the explosion of the internet and the explosion of social media, the way in which we get information has dramatically changed. Gaming journalism outlets aren't really necessarily here to announce games and provide coverage of games for us anymore, because while we can get that information and while it's helpful, we can get that same shit from their YouTube page. You know, How many times, like, how many people have Atlas's YouTube page favorited on, like, in their profile? How many people have Sega's YouTube page? How many people have Sony, like Sony of America of YouTube page? The thing is that you can get information directly from the publishers, directly from the developers now. People are directly connected with the game creation organizations in a way that was not even imagined 20 years ago. So you're kind of sort of in the position of, well, why do video game magazines exist anymore? They don't exist to break information on games because unless the parent company, like the publisher or the developer, decide there is some benefit to releasing it in a magazine in this way, it's easier for you to just release your own website and release your own YouTube videos and release your own media kits through Twitter. And even then, even if you decide you want to have a big break, push it out through some kind of friendly influencer on YouTube or on Twitch or on Instagram or whatever. So, from that perspective, gaming media has less of a reason to exist. At this point, a lot of the gaming media exists to write reviews, to provide some type of opinion-based commentary, and to break stories that might not necessarily be the ones that gaming companies want to have in the forefront. And in that last category, like, Kotaku is king right now. Whether or not you like them for anything else, they're the ones doing the investigative journalism. Game Informer is not going to usurp that role, especially not with their back against the wall financially. So their options are video game reviews and opinion commentary. And for opinion commentary, like, you're not necessarily going to go to Game Informer, because Game Informer that would require something of a heavy rebranding of what they're doing. Like, opinion commentary has become the trade of a lot of internet specific gaming websites. So, your Giant Bombs, your Polygons, your Waypoints. Those
Shotgun.
Right. Those websites deal as much in game reviews as they deal in cult of personality. You're coming there not just because you want to get reviews, but you're coming there because you like the people who are writing about stuff. So you're going to Giant Bomb because you want Jeff Gerstmann's opinion on things. You're going to Polygon because you want everybody I can think of doesn't work there anymore, but you want somebody who writes at Polygon's information. If you go to Waypoint, you want, Austin. I can't think of his fucking last name. Austin Walker. You want Austin Walker's opinion, or I don't really read Waypoint, so I can't think of anybody else who works there. But you get the point of what I'm saying. Like, you want specific writers' opinions from those sites. Game Informer would have to pivot pretty hard to become that. And again, you can't really do that when your back is to the wall. And like, that's the biggest thing with Game Informer, is that they were one of the last vestiges of the print media cycle that existed. Like, they have a website and things are put on that website, but by and large, they were still heavily relying on the idea of being print content, of being a thing that was part of the GameStop experience.
Right.
And now it's just kind of like,
point. We're pretty much the last two big print heavy competitors at this point for that kind of media. I know
EGM is still around after having a short death. Is game game was it not GameSpot? Game Pro still around, or did they kick the bucket?
oh, they're super dead.
Okay.
They are super dead.
Yeah.
Most print magazines are dead at this point.
Yep.
And the thing is that generally speaking, if you were a print magazine, you either pivoted or you died. PC Gamer pivoted.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing fine-ish, I say, not having any visibility into their background stuff and completely unaware of the fact that they may lay off all of their people fucking tomorrow because that's just the nature of video games journalism in the year 2019. Thanks, right-wing reactionary dipshits. But the thing of it is, right, we're in this difficult situation where you as a content creation platform, as a magazine, as a website, as a whatever,
Mm-hmm.
kind of only matter so long as you can establish yourself in the minds of the people reading, watching, whatever, as a place that they want to go to get information and content. Most gaming websites kind of hit a plateau and stop. Like IGN and GameSpot, I think, are like, you know, the two websites that are lording over everyone else, like the fucking Omega Man in the post-apocalyptic landscape, and like everybody else is just, you know, scraping for the and Kotaku and everybody else is just scraping for crumbs at this point. Like they have to be content with whatever amount of viewership they have, but they are definitely nowhere near that top 3 spot. And Game Informer has been existing so long as a paid subsidiary of a video game sales store. And you know, we can talk about whatever impact that has on their journalistic capability, whatever impact that has on their brand, etc.
Fair.
Doesn't fucking matter. Point is, they have existed for as long as they have because they were being subsidized by being associated with that brand.
Mm-hmm.
Now that brand is canning them and may actually be gone itself in a few years. What's to happen to Game Informer? It's probably just going to be bought from a brand name perspective and shelved. Because there is no value in the brand name of Game Informer. There's use in having the assets to a certain extent, to owning the name, to owning the content that they've created. But there's not really any value in owning an active version of Game Informer in 2019.
Yeah.
Like I don't see
Even with a complete rebranding, I don't feel like the name itself is really the only thing that would have any volume at this point. And
yeah, like most
said,
of the people
assets,
associated with it are just going to leave. Like most of the people associated with it are either going to find jobs in the industry or they aren't. But like Game Informer itself doesn't have a brand name anybody gives a fuck about. We can have positive memories of Game Informer from one time and also acknowledge that we're not reading Game Informer, we're not buying Game Informer, we don't care about Game Informer now. The list of people who give a shit about Game Informer as a magazine today is very small, and it's getting smaller all the time. It would take a monumental shift for them to come back and do anything.
That's where I think the idea, like what you mentioned, someone will buy the name, shelve it, and just hold on to the assets, because it's been done many times before. Well, somebody will acquire the assets of something, kill it off, and then let time pass, and then bring it back and let that nostalgia at least, you know, bring some of the people back, and sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, there will probably be an attempt at that, I believe, in the next 10 years if Game Informer is bought and shelved. But aside from that, I mean, there isn't really much hope for a Game Informer at this point.
I don't think so.
Like there is.
I don't really think so, no.
It's unfortunate because I've actually contacted and I've talked to quite a few of the members of Game Informer. I mean, I've tried to talk to Andrew Reiner, and I've tried talking to Mr. McNamara, who are two guys that I have looked up to for decades as gaming journalists. One of the other guys I looked up to, he hasn't been with Game Informer in a couple decades, was Bill Berghammer, and he left to work at G4 or Tech TV and G4 for a while, and now he's off. I forget what he's doing now, but he and I are friends on Facebook. We don't talk that often, but I just told him, hey, are you the same guy that used to do the PC reviews on Game Informer back in the 90s? And he's like, yes, I am. I was like, I'm a big fan. Can I be friends with you? And I've been meaning to get him on this show. I've tried for like the last few years, and it just wasn't working with the schedule because I would love to pick his brain. I think this would be a topic suitable for his opinion in that regards. But unfortunately, that's just how the cookie crumbles because I believe the phrase goes, Prince is dead.
Yeah.
So with that, though, to the people who unfortunately lost their jobs today, I wish you well, I wish you success, and I hope you get back on your feet really soon. Moving on to our next topic, it's a little bit more dire now. In the wake of the Kyo anime studio getting burnt down by an arsonist, Square Enix has received not one, but 2 death threats from 2 individuals. The first one, of course, being upset because he couldn't beat a boss in a game, I believe. It was pretty pathetic or something like that. But this is just a week or two after that the animation studio fire. And I just find this really appalling. Whether it was a joke or not, it is in extremely bad taste. This is something that has to be taken seriously, especially with the recent light of a bunch of tragedies. I mean, a couple days ago, 69 people were killed in a wedding in Afghanistan. 180 were injured from a blast. Just before that, of course, there was 3 attempted shootings that were stopped, and before that, 2 shootings in Ohio and in El Paso, Texas. Fucking enough already. Alright? I mean, granted, this, in hindsight, is not nearly as bad as what I've just described, but people are just...
anything that's like, threatening people,
Yes.
causing loss of life, things of that nature is deeply fucking terrible and should not be tolerated.
Unacceptable. Absolutely. But...
I mean, if you're gonna go out on a limb to basically say, "Hey, I don't like the thing that specific thing that you did. I'm going to kill you because of that thing that you did," there's a problem there, and that needs to be looked into. That person needs to be checked into some form of a hospital, regardless of whether it's physical or mental, and things need to be checked on because this is getting to a point now where if it's not a release event of some sort where we're hyped about a game that's coming out, we're trying to not get upset over the fact that somebody is trying to take human life again in the public eye because this is their 5 minutes of fame. And I feel like it's getting just to the point where we're so desensitized and so expectant of, well, who's going to do it next? What's going to happen this time? Who's getting the death threats? Like, it's not funny. It's just stupid. And the fact that we have to keep talking about it really gets to the point where it's just like, what else can we do? There's really nothing else that can happen other than we need to find a way to just stop it at the source. And that's a lot more difficult than a lot of people think because that's not something that's very simple to deal with. So the fact that we have every couple of weeks we get this new, so-and-so death threats or XYZ gunfire, and it's like, it's so out of control that it's, obviously there's a political message that needs to be addressed in some capacity for certain parts of this, and there are, mental health checks and understanding of personal issues, that need to be addressed. But the fact that something like this is just so commonplace now, and it's getting to the point where even something like this, 5-10 years ago, this would have been laughed off and no one would have done anything because whatever the issue was would have been addressed or fixed down the road and no one would have been the wiser. But because of the fact that this stuff is so commonplace and so in front of everyone's eyes at this point, it's like we know that something like this is going to happen regularly now, and now it's just a matter of it took us this long to finally get to the point where we're like, oh, maybe we should do something about it. And I feel like that's where the issue is. So I don't know. It's silly that we have to even think that something like this could be actually followed up on.
And it's also crazy because just not too long ago, and it goes into I think it goes into effect next year. Video game addiction will be considered a
mental disorder.
A mental disorder, and we're getting all these enraged gamers about elements of their games. One of these guys in particular threatening Square Enix. So now this guy is gonna, even if let's say it wasn't the game, he obviously has some anger issues that need to be dealt with. So now he has a fallback for his issue.
Oh, but
I'm
disabled. I have a mental illness because of gaming addiction.
Yeah.
It becomes the Twinkie defense.
Well, here's the thing, right? We've kind of already established, at least in the United States, that even if you don't have some type of mental disorder or whatever, you aren't really necessarily going to be held accountable to threatening someone's life anyway. Unless the person that you are threatening is above a certain degree of popularity and fame, or you do it in a way that is so consistent and so pervasive that you are deemed like a danger to yourself and others. Like, there aren't necessarily federal laws on the books for harassment. There aren't federal laws on the books for threats in that capacity that can be easily applied in all cases. And we kind of saw that during the high period of Gamergate, where you would see people on the internet get death threats, get driven from their homes, get harassed in various ways. And how many people actually went to court about this? Like fucking zero. Fucking zero. So there is no real easy method to deal with this sort of situation because, at least from the US's perspective, there's no federal method of stepping in and getting involved in this. And I'm not saying that there necessarily should be, because the federal government generally tries to avoid writing laws that are federally enforced to that level, because if they do and something is wrong with those laws, it causes damage. Like, look at Sesta and Fosta got pushed out really fast, and now it's fucking a lot of people in ways that nobody even expected that it could. So that is a reason why a lot of people in the federal government kind of sort of shy away from the idea of putting down federal regulations on certain types of behaviors, certain types of legal activities, figuring that the states will institute their own policies for it. And I mean, some do, some don't, and we kind of end up in a position where bad stuff ends up happening in this way, and nothing is done about it because there isn't really a precedent to do something.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you think kind of circumstances will eventually, lead to something like this with the involvement of the World Health Organization and this gaming addiction order coming to the defense of something like this? Like, I mean, it's probably not going to happen in Japan for this schmuck that just sent the threats.
I wouldn't be so sure about that. I feel
you think
like
that would be possible.
I think that something like that could be used as a point of contention or a point of this is where we need to have regulations set. So, I could go into multiple different tangents based on multiple different sides of things, purely just based on what's happened in the last year and a half in terms of different types of problems that come from specific types of people like this. But I feel like the KyoAni thing is precedent. It sets a precedent because now we can see, hey, look, this is really a problem, and it's not just related to one or two specific topics. Mental health is something that needs to be looked at, and it's something that needs to be discussed openly across multiple organizations, not for regulation purposes, but to understand the problems and to try to figure out ways of being able to help people and have these kinds of disabilities and these different types of issues be discussed in a way that's healthy. And I think that the KyoAni situation sets a precedent for something like that. Mm-hmm. Because it didn't happen in the United States doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the first thing on everyone's mind, but it's definitely going to be something that people are going to want to discuss. And if something like that comes up, the KyoAni fire will definitely be one of the top things of this is where we need to see specific, issues dealt with. This is where we need to have people look at, this is a problem, this is something we need to discuss, and this is something we need to find out how to help people with. And I think that's where this is going to end up heading. So to say that it's not a big is not as big as it probably should have been, I think that's wrong. I think it's huge. I think that something like this, especially knowing that it came from somewhere that wasn't the United States, is going to help set that precedent and help people in in the WHO and in general to help try to find ways to curb things like death threats and attacks and things like that, because we'll better understand where those people are coming from rather than just go, is it terrorism or not? Because that's where we're looking at right now. But again, like I said, there's multiple different political avenues that we could go down about something like that. That's not what we're talking about here, in this specific case anyway.
Yep. So it pretty much will just come down to it. Is this terrorist driven, or is this just mental gaming addiction issue related? Pretty much what it comes down to, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a shame, because I frankly think that people should just, get their head out their ass. And if you can't beat the boss of a game, you shouldn't be tweeting threats to a gaming company.
Extremism is extremism regardless of where it comes from. Eventually, there will be somebody on that extreme side of I'm upset, and creates that push towards something that could be considered psychotic. But
yeah,
I mean,
I want to just step in real quick and just say, I think it's important to note that there's a distinguishing factor between somebody who legitimately needs help on some level or another and just some a-hole on the internet being a jerk. And
absolutely.
I think that's an important distinction where, if somebody's just being a dumb dick to people on the internet, like swearing at them and calling them names and, sending them death threats because it's for the lulz or whatever the fuck, fuck that person. They're just a piece of shit. But if somebody has some type of legitimate mental health disorder that is causing them to obsess over this sort of thing in a way that's making them respond in these fashions, they should be helped. They should get some type of help from others. And I think the concern is inevitably going to end up becoming, when somebody does something like this, A, how credible is this threat? And B, is this somebody just trolling, or is this somebody who might actually act on this? And it's just deeply frustrating because there's, like, I legitimately feel for somebody who is going through something like this and is going through a degree of, like, not, like, just kind of responding negatively to things in ways that they should not be responding.
Mhm.
Like, that it's just, like, they're just unwell
But
in some form or
on that
fashion.
note, though, I do want to point the finger at another industry where they go through something like this almost constantly, and it's very alarming how often it happens, and that's the music industry. Artists are constantly threatened by their fans for, oh, you're changing genres, or you change the style of your music. I mean, let's just put it this way: Metallica's probably gotten the most threats out of anybody for selling out numerous times or whatever.
Well, I mean,
but then you
look
also
at-
have art, and they get death threats from like everybody. And I'm sure the majority of it don't mean it, but then you have the people who are like, let's say, super fans. Someone who would go up and
Well-
kill Dimebag Darrell, someone who goes up and kills John Lennon, someone who goes and kills Celine. I mean, these people aren't really sending death threats to these people. They just show up and it happens. So it's like, where do you draw the line
it's
at
the same-
attention seeking? Where do you draw the line at mental health? Where do you draw the line at?
That's what needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
I think that's the big precedent here that needs to be talked about. And that's a big issue.
Mhm.
And I think people need to understand that there is going to be a difference. The problem is how do we know that? Well, we need to talk more about it because it's just not talked about. Mental health in general just generally isn't talked about. A lot of people think that certain types of illnesses or certain types of disorders don't need to be talked about because people can still handle them because that's what medication's for. Not everybody can be medicated. Not everybody will remember to medicate themselves. So there
It wasn't
is
until the late 80s that Asperger's syndrome was considered a syndrome.
Exactly. So there are things that people don't understand or don't have the ability to understand. So that's what I'm getting at. We need to have that conversation. We need to know where that line is, because if we don't know where that line is, what are we going to do next? Like,
Mhm.
we're just going to think it's all trolling, and then it ends up not being, and then we end up with another Kyoani, or we end up with another Dimebag Darrell, or we end up with another, I don't know. The baseline is that knowing that there is that difference exists is a good start. Finding out how to cope and deal with those differences, that's where we need to really have the next discussion. That's where we need to really step up and start really looking at the issues that are going on with those differences and trying to find a way to help those people that need help.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, I think that's really about it that we can cover pretty much. It's just at this point a discussion needs to be started. Some dialogue needs to move forward in order for stuff like this to be prevented, to be worked on, for people to be helped, so nobody dies, because dying sucks.
I am not a fan.
No.
No. Anyway, so moving on, let's talk about something a little bit happier that a lot of people are very happy about, and that is Sony acquiring Insomniac Games, which, let's be honest, that's a fucking good move on their part. I mean, Insomniac has been pretty much a big supporter of Sony for the past 15 years now, probably even longer than that, and they are probably one of the top studios in the past like 2 decades, with consistent quality releases. The last one, of course, being the Spider-Man game that I think everybody loves. I'm not so sure. I might have to get a second opinion on that.
Everybody that I know liked Spider-Man. It was a very well received game critically too. So it's hard to
Yeah,
say.
I mean,
but,
everybody I know thought it was pretty fucking good.
Yeah,
but Insomniac as a baseline has done. They've got 3 really solid series that they've made. Well, 3 really solid titles that they've made over the course of their existence, and that's the Spyro franchise, the Ratchet and Clank franchise, and the newest Spider-Man game. Those are the games that basically everyone knows them for. They have some other games that are kind of side games that not a lot of people either knew about or were just like, that's that's a thing they did, but I mean, because like Resistance,
Mhm.
no one really remembers
Haze.
Resistance.
Haze.
God, Haze was fucking terrible.
They made Haze.
I mean, yes, they made Haze, and that's the thing. Like, I don't want to rain on anybody's parade or anything, but
Huh.
like, they're a great company by and large. Spider-Man's awesome. Sunset Overdrive was pretty good.
Mhm.
They made Haze. Just
I don't see that on their list of games though.
if you, I could have sworn I just looked it up, and I could have sworn I saw that.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the games that did it something that they published?
No, well, Ubisoft published it.
Oh yeah, no, because I'm looking at all of the developed games that they've made, and I don't.
I could have
don't
sworn
see
I
it.
literally just fucking saw it, like, today. That's very strange.
That's interesting.
I don't know. Maybe I'm having a stroke.
don't say that, Mark.
Is Free Radical Design in Ubisoft?
And what the fuck did I see on there that was really bad? I have to go fucking look again now. There was a game I saw on there that was really goddamn bad.
Time to research.
I literally was just...
You're probably thinking of Fuse.
Fuse, yes, okay. Yeah, you're right. Fuse. My bad. Which is
Yeah.
also really bad.
Right, because that was Insomniac and EA.
Yeah, that game is also fucking terrible.
Yeah, it's bad. But anyway, as a baseline, Insomniac has made some relatively good decisions in terms of games that they've made. Some not so good, but
Yeah.
most of the primary franchises that they have made are good.
Mhm.
And so Sony buying them probably the best thing for them at this point, I think.
I mean, they've been supporting them since the PlayStation 1. I mean, I don't see why they didn't just buy them 10 or 15 years ago, to be truthfully honest. I mean, one of the best games I've ever played is Disruptor, one of the first-person shooters that felt like a genuine console first-person shooter. It was a really solid game. And then, of course, yeah, the Spyro trilogy on the PlayStation was really solid. It's just that they've been very consistent, and then they also had that that wonderful friendship with Naughty Dog that allowed them to bounce off of each other using each other's engines and whatnot and mechanics. I mean, they had some kind of like chemistry going on, and that helped them become a much better developer as the years went on. So, I mean, yeah, granted, every Spyro trilogy you get, you're going to get a Fuse every now and then, but not every game company can turn out gold all the time. But I mean, it's still they've been pretty solid in regards to what they've been putting out, and I'm very happy for this acquisition.
Oh,
Go on.
I guess I never realized that Ryan Coons used to be an employee of Insomniac.
Yeah, I saw that.
I
was
didn't-
like, oh.
I didn't realize that that's who that was. I honestly had completely spaced that he was an Insomniac employee. For those of you who may not know, Ryan Coons is the creator of Hunipop. But apparently, yeah, he apparently used to be an employee of Insomniac. That was a thing that I didn't know. So, entertaining.
So now, looking forward to the next generation of game consoles, of course. I mean, Microsoft's been beefing up their repertoire with, a ton of studios, with a bunch of games
Yeah.
coming out. Now, Sony
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the reason that this fucking happened. By
Yeah,
the way,
yeah, absolutely.
Let us not pretend otherwise. That is absolutely the reason Sony bought into that. Because whether they had never had any interest beforehand, or whether Irrational had never had any interest in selling, or whatever, what it boils down to right now is Sony saw Microsoft loading themselves for bear with all of these different companies, and they were like, hey, Irrational, you guys just made this awesome Spider-Man game. Would you like to do that for us forever?
Forever.
And that's kind of where that goes. That happened because Microsoft bought a shitload of really good companies, and Sony was like, oh, we better shore up the people that we need here.
Well, I'll tell you what. Right now, I better hurry up and buy that Spider-Man game before the licensing agreement between Disney and Sony falls apart. Because
Fucking yikes.
yeah. So
That's not gonna have anything to do with anything as far as that goes.
well,
No,
if they
game
lose the
itself will
Marvel
stay in
license,
rotation.
well, if they lose the Marvel license, they have to get rid of. They can't put out the game anymore.
Mm,
I mean, it just happened with Capcom did not renew their license with Disney, and they had to pull DuckTales. And now my copy of DuckTales for the Wii U is worth $150.
That's different. Remember who is in charge of Spider-Man?
Yes, but at the same time, once those rights expire, they revert back.
We
to
don't know
Marvel.
we don't know what the game contract
Right.
rights are. We
It's
don't
a
know.
totally different thing.
Are we
Right,
sure
that's
about
totally
that?
different.
thing.
Well, I am 100% positive that is a totally different can of worms.
Mm-hmm.
The game license rights are completely different from the.
We're
Movie
not talking
license
like
rights.
Marvel versus Capcom, Marvel pulling it and having Capcom having to pull all the Marvel titles. We're talking this is Sony dealing with Marvel and dealing with a game license that Sony owns, even though it is a Marvel property. So this is a totally different conversation that we're having here. This is not even remotely the same idea.
Well, then we'll have that conversation
I mean,
in
that
a future
game-
episode.
That game can eventually be delisted. It's not going to be delisted like tomorrow. You know,
Well,
Right.
no.
it's going to be a while. They almost certainly have like some type of multi-year plan associated with it, and the fact that they're talking about a sequel indicates to me that they probably bought a few years on that particular license.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, for sure. Plus, also, like, think about like the implications of Insomniac joining Sony Worldwide Studios. Like, because that basically means that they will still be able to communicate with Naughty Dog, but that also means now that they will have a much more, I don't want to say intimate, because I don't feel like that's the right word, but they will have a much closer relationship with Sucker Punch.
Cohesive?
That'd probably work, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, having the ability to get back with Sucker Punch means that maybe we'll finally see a new Sly Cooper game. Maybe we'll finally see a resurgence of platformers. We might even see entirely new IPs that combine properties between the guys that have been really good at doing these kinds of games. So I think that
Sony
that
PlayStation
having
All Stars
Insomniac-
too.
It's
You just
we're not
got
getting into
sour.
the Smash conversation. We are not getting into the Smash conversation today. It is not happening. I'm not gonna go there. I feel like there are some companies that are super happy that it happened. I feel like there are people that are currently in the Sony Worldwide Studios group that are ecstatic that Insomniac is joining Sony Worldwide Studios. Because again, I think that having all of these companies together implies that there is something larger that could be done cross-asset that could create a much more fantastic, just series of games that we may not have thought come out of these studios if they'd stayed by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or, heaven forbid, purchased by Microsoft.
All right, so now here's the big major question. Since Sony is now amping things up, who's next to be acquired? Do you think they're going to buy Naughty Dog? Do you think maybe they'll go for a power play, maybe go after Platinum Games? Who do you think they'll go after?
I think they've probably made overtures, if not throughout the history of existence, then at least recently, towards Naughty Dog.
Mhm.
Whether or not Naughty Dog ultimately gets purchased is, whether or not they want to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because they are a
Like-
company that likes to go at it on their own. They don't want to really answer to anybody. That's why they left their agreement with Activision back on the original PlayStation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm sure that they have an open opportunity to join the Sony family if they wish to do so. Whether or not they are going to is probably at their call. It's probably their decision. But I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
that conversation has been had a few times.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sure.
So then if not
Plus-
Naughty Dog, who?
Naughty Dog makes a lot more sense. Platinum, maybe not so much so, because there's a bigger difference between just sort of the market share for who those are.
True, but
But-
then again, did you really see Ninja Theory getting bought by Microsoft?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I didn't
yeah.
see Microsoft approaching them to buy them. It's like that's the two things that you have to keep in mind is A, would A company approach this company and buy them, and B, would this company
You're breaking
to
up,
being
Mark.
purchased? Sorry, but would this company be receptive to being purchased?
Mm-hmm.
Did I think Microsoft was going to reach out and buy Ninja Theory? No. Did I think Ninja Theory was receptive to being purchased? Absolutely. Absolutely. So, do I think Platinum Studio is receptive to being purchased? No. Their people already worked for Capcom. Their people were already part of Clover Studio. I don't think they want to be under somebody's thumb anytime soon because it sucked the last time for them.
Mm-hmm.
Do I see somebody wanting to buy Platinum Studio? Not really. They generally have a reputation of making some okay to good to very good games under their own banner, but when they're handed other people's properties, it usually sucks.
Usually.
I don't
I
know.
feel like-
I really enjoyed Transformers Devastation and the last Ninja Turtles game. I thought those were pretty fun.
You are the only person I know who likes that last Ninja Turtles game. Can I tell you?
Which
you are
one?
the
It was
only
not
person
good.
I know.
I played it. I own it. I can still play it if I wanted to on Steam. It's not as good as I wanted it to be. I felt like it was a lot more clunky.
And let's be honest, if anybody's going to buy Platinum games, it's going to be Nintendo.
Oh, absolutely.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, with the No More
Hands
Heroes
down.
franchise being as big as it was on the Wii and Wii U.
No More Heroes is Grasshopper manufacturer, not Platinum.
Not Platinum.
Really?
Bayonetta,
Bayonetta.
yes.
That's
You're
Grasshopper.
thinking Bayonetta.
No More
why
Heroes is
am I
owned by
thinking
Suda
that?
50. Is Suda 51.
Suda 51.
Yeah.
There we go. That's what I'm.
Yep.
Why did I have such a brain fart
See,
like that?
Yeah, Suda
I
51
feel
is
like-
another person who absolutely would not sell if he didn't have to, because
No.
he wouldn't be able to make the weird shit that he makes working for
Right?
another company.
Right? Absolutely. See, I think that the going back to Naughty Dog again, I think this is just sort of my last thought on this. Going back to Naughty Dog, I feel like if Sony was going to approach any other company at this point, Naughty Dog is the only one that makes sense. Why? The same way that getting Insomniac under the banner works by having them be able to coexist in the same space as Sucker Punch, having Naughty Dog under the umbrella means that they get to exist under the same umbrella as Guerrilla Games of Horizon Zero Dawn fame. So I feel like you put the two bigger names in the same wheelhouse and you give them access to each other's assets, you have a much better chance of putting out product that actually sells very well and can be a very solid use of the technology and the assets and the company and the employees that you get from that introduction into the umbrella. I really feel like that's the smart move. If anybody is going to be purchased, that's the one that makes the most sense right now for Sony.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure who else they would approach besides Naughty Dog myself, to be truthfully honest. But, again, Microsoft came out of left field with a whole bunch of studios. I wouldn't be surprised if they, announced maybe one or two more acquisitions by the end of the year. Maybe by Tokyo Game Show we might hear another. Who knows? Or you got to get ready for the next generation of console wars, so you might as well get your blows in beforehand.
You want to know what Sony does to actually, not probably just a sucker punch into the gut, but probably a low blow would be to approach Gearbox.
It would be a possibility, yeah.
Do I think that'll ever happen? Probably not. But if I were a betting woman and there was a way that if we were just to put into a hypothetical of could they buy anybody and would they be receptive to that purchase, Gearbox would be the next logical choice aside from Naughty Dog, because Borderlands, that's a big goddamn deal for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And you put Sony on the bandwagon with that company, and that really puts a huge kick in the dick to Microsoft and a huge kick in the dick to, PC in general, because now you've put them into a position where they're a console family company, and PC, while still valid for them, is not exactly where they're going to be putting a lot of their priority into. So it's an interesting, concept of would that really work? In a perfect world, probably not. But if it was something that would be viable just because, I think that would be like the only logical company right now that would make a lot of sense under the Sony Worldwide banner.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think that's a good place to leave this topic. Sony made a big move today, acquiring Insomniac Games, which definitely helps their repertoire of having solid first-party content going into the next generation. And with that, we are now going to go to the final topic of conversation for the end of the show, and that is the S4. Mark, could you please explain to our audience what the S4 is?
Sure. So, back when myself and Robert were a part of Die Hard Game Fan, the modern website, not the original print magazine, just for clarification purposes, an idea that Mr. Alex Lucard, our editor-in-chief, came up with was what's called the S4. What this essentially is we take a franchise that hasn't been having anything done with it for a while, whether it be, like it's dead, the owners of it have just decommissioned it for a while, it's fallen out of grace, whatever, and we look over that particular franchise and we evaluate it and decide, do we want to see more out of it? The concept of the S4 comes from the four ways in which a franchise can be done in this conversation, dependent upon our particular opinions of it. Sequel, spin-off, start over, stay dead. Sequel is exactly what it implies. Make another game in the franchise based on the previous games that have existed. Spin-off would be you take something from that franchise that exists and build it into its own game. I can't necessarily think of any spin-offs that have happened recently, but as an example, it would be something along the lines of, like, when Arrow the Acrobat was a thing for a while, they eventually made a game in that universe, Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel, which was related, but not actually an Arrow game.
Or Knuckles Chaotix to Sonic the Hedgehog.
Right. Or the various Mario-type games that are not actual Super Mario games. So, Mario Kart. Mario Golf, etc. Start over is a reboot. It would be, we're going to completely redo the franchise as it exists and try to do something else with it, whatever it is we're going to do. Stay dead is exactly what you would think it would be. We don't want to see anything else from it. Get it the fuck out of here.
Yep. All right, and with that, we are going to talk about today's game, and Jan gracefully picked this franchise, which is also one of my favorite franchises of all time, and that is Wing Commander. Now, I'm going to jump in here and let you guys know what Wing Commander is. It is a franchise that was created in the late 80s by Chris Roberts, who at the time joined Orion Game Studio, which didn't really have a whole lot going on in the 80s. And then he pitched an idea, and it came out, and it was a huge success. It was Wing Commander, which was a space dogfighting game. Pretty much an awesome idea. You have an enemy called the Kilrathi, which are probably, I guess, the equivalent of a Klingon, but they're cat-based. And they had numerous types of ships for you to fly. One of the biggest things was that it had a progressive story and branching paths, which give you multiple endings as the game progressed. And there was definitely two. For the first two games, there was at least two endings you can acquire, and they weren't 3D yet, although it was, pixelated art in a 3D space. It wasn't until they didn't go fully 3D until Wing Commander 3, which is also when they included full motion video, and that is where the series is most famously known for, because they involved a couple famous actors like Mark Hamill. If you don't know who he is, I can't fucking help you. But what Wing Commander did, which was Wing Commander 3 and 4 did, which was amazing, was it didn't just have branching paths, but the story and the outcome of certain decisions that you make gravely affected the game as you progressed. Certain members
Right.
would die in the middle of a campaign and never come back, or someone will be injured and then return, or they will get pissed off at you and no longer be available at your disposal to help you out. Like, there was a really interesting love triangle in the third game, and
Oh, yeah.
depending on who you picked, well, you're shit out of luck because the other person's not showing up. And then there was, of course, the fourth game, which was really interesting because it was all about, I want to say, I'm trying to remember the term, emulating, like, real life, and, god damn it. It's pretty much like what RoboCop was, the first movie, where it was just, taking a look at life and, like, mocking it. Like corporations taking over the world and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I can't remember the fucking
It was a
phrase.
commentary. It's a
Commentary,
social
social commentary. Like, yeah, Wing Commander 4 was a social commentary. Pretty much, the military is trying to take over the Earth, and they're creating all these wars to make it seem like the Kilrathi are betraying us and stuff like that. So it was a very interesting game. I would say the last game in the franchise that was not a spin-off was Prophecy, which came out in 1997, and there was a grand total of 5 games in the main series, and this is a game that actually had a franchise that had multiple spin-offs. You had Privateer 1 and 2, which was completely different, like open-ended space travel where you're a trader or you're a pirate or whatever. You had Armada, which was an interesting like space combat simulator game where you can actually build up an army and then go off and like invade like a planet or whatever, combat like whoever it is. You could even play online, I believe, at one point, or it was LAN. I can't remember, but I had a lot of fun with that. And after 1997, poof, the franchise died, only to randomly resurface in 2007 with the underwhelming Wing Commander Armada game, which was a top-down arcade shooter game, arena game.
Yeah, Wing Commander Arena, yeah.
And then after that, nothing. So the franchise has been dead and dormant for 12 years now. And this game is perfect for us to discuss. And with that, Mark, you shall make the first decision.
No, I'm eating something right now. Can one of you guys do it, and I'll be ready in a minute.
Jan?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna go on start over. That's just me. I feel like in a day and age where we have the technology with the consoles, with like PlayStation and with VR being as huge as it actually is right now in the gaming realm, it's still a fairly new concept, but having something like this in a VR space that's fully first person really puts to a conceptualized idea of what this whole game series was supposed to be about. Originally it was just space combat. It was built to really push the idea of what first-person space combat could be like on PC, and then later on consoles. But like when like you got to think like when the first Wing Commander came out, and then the second one came out in '91. Like me and my friends, we went out and we bought joysticks specifically to play this game because it was almost a necessity at the time to have that. And being able to actually fly around and have it, the concept of what they were going for was this whole idea of space battles that could rival what you saw in Star Wars at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And really play to that concept. When they stepped up with Wing Commander 3, having live action filming, every game that they made in the franchise had some form of FMV for cutscenes, which was relatively still new, but still relatively unheard of because of the amount of firepower they put in it. You've got John Rhys Davies, Mark Hamill, Thomas F. Wilson, Malcolm McDowell, as well as Christopher Walken, John Hurt, and Clive Owen in Privateer 2.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's huge. That's crazy names. Like, you wouldn't expect these kind of relatively big names in this ridiculously sort of niche kind of video game. Like, a lot of people didn't know that these people are in these games, but
And
the
it's
people
not
who
just a
played them,
niche; it's a
they're
spin-off
good.
too.
Well, in general, yes. The concept of what they did with the Privateer world was more focused on less so much the story aspects of 3 and 4 and more on the exploration and combat aspects of what 1 and 2 were more about. And then 3 and 4 came out, and it's silly. It's even to this day. 1996 was when Wing Commander 4 came out. It was called Wing Commander 4: The Price of Freedom. And it's very interesting because really early on in the game, the big tagline for the entirety of the game, like you said earlier, was this big social commentary. The line that really stuck with me was, "The price of freedom is eternal vigilance." And like, to this day, that still sticks with me because that's really not false at all. There's definitely a lot of need for that. But the concept behind what they were doing with this was basically taking a story and this entire idea of texture map 3D instead of sprite based graphics was huge for them. So having this concept of what they're doing, okay, so I know that Star Citizen exists. I know that Star Citizen is not terrible. I also know that Star Citizen is still in development hell, even though it's technically early access. I feel like, however, that there are some things that are different in Star Citizen that do not match or do not have the same heart as what Wing Commander was doing. Wing Commander was very simple. It was very fast-paced. It was built to be in that way because of sort of what the whole game was supposed to be about, which was just badass dogfights in space. So to see something like this started over and having the ability to really put back in people's minds what really made Wing Commander in general and just what made space dogfights and why a lot of these Star Wars spin-off games like Rogue Squadron, even though they're third person, still have a lot of sway in that sort of genre purely because of the fact that these games existed. And I feel like starting over and having the ability to really go back to its roots and really have it go back to the core concept of what the gameplay was supposed to be about makes the most sense for the series. It may not have to be the same people. In fact, if it was the same people, it would be a little weird right off the bat. But then again, who knows? That could always be a thing. I'm sure Mark Hamill would be more than happy to reprise his role. But I feel like starting over is the best idea for it, especially since we saw some spin-offs that were less than stellar towards the end of the life cycle of the franchise. But knowing full well that not a lot of people really have joysticks anymore and are generally you're either on a gamepad or you're on keyboard and mouse. And let's be honest, that is not very easily done in terms of how a joystick simulates when you're actually flying a ship like that. So I think that the smartest play for something like this would be to put it on VR. Put it on the Oculus, put it on the Vive, put it on whatever Seeds is called. I can't remember off the top of my head. But give it the freedom of having a controller that can simulate a joystick, that gives you the feeling of being in the cockpit, that gives you the feeling of being in that first-person perspective, that gives you the ability to basically do everything that you did in the original games, but in a much more up-to-date and more... I hate to use the word next-gen in this specific instance because that's not really the case, but having it be in that current power base of what the graphics that we have now can actually do for that series. I feel like that's really where I personally think that it should be.
Okay, I think I'll go next. For me, Wing Commander is a franchise that is near and dear to my heart. One of my favorite memories from the 90s. And with that, I have to say that the franchise should stay dead. The franchise, I feel, has accomplished all that it could have in terms of the space combat genre, in terms of injecting a narrative or story element, any freedom into a space sim as far as you can get. I mean, granted, Chris Roberts is working on, Star Citizen and trying to turn it into the blossoming, like
The open world sandbox
turn it
commander
into
we
his
all
magnum
wanted.
opus, whatever. Yeah, like whatever it is he's trying to make, he's putting his heart and soul into it, and it's just probably never going to see the light of day in its current state. But the franchise, I think,
has about Elite Dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I mean,
Yikes.
this is a man who's also released games that I feel have improved upon the formula of Wing Commander, like Star Lancer, and what else did he do? Conquest, Frontier Wars, and Freelancer, of course.
Mm-hmm.
All these are really stellar games that have moved forward space combat sim games. And to be truthfully honest, I feel the franchise has run its course as an IP and as a genre, because, to be truthfully honest, outside of those few, no one is really interested in space combat sims anymore. I mean, right now
I think the entire user base of EVE has probably got something to say about that.
well, EVE is a completely different beast compared to the Wing Commander franchise.
Oh, I understand that, but what I'm getting at is that is something that has been sorely lacking in a lot of these sci-fi MMOs to date. Things like EVE and Star Wars: The Old Republic probably would have benefited far more from an engine that would have been something like that you had from Wing Commander versus what they currently have.
Yeah, but now if you look at it, if anything, Wing Commander, has never stepped foot into the MMO genre. The closest they came was maybe online play with games like Armada or Privateer 2. And that was severely limited in and of itself. The closest you're going to get is Star Citizen. And in its current state of play, I don't think it's going to work as well. I mean, the idea is there, and it's great. It's just a shame it doesn't have the Wing Commander name, because that would be nice. But really, it's time to go. I mean, the franchise hit its stride. It had 7 spin-offs, 6 main games, 2 canceled games in the franchise, short-lived cartoon series, a horrible a horrible movie starring Freddie Prinze Jr., directed by Chris Roberts, by the way.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that movie.
I mean, I enjoyed it, but I recognize it as a bad film. I mean, the game franchise has ran its course, and even if they do reboot it or make a sequel, I'm probably going to be on board, unless it's Armada or Armada-esque. But really, at this point in time, I mean, there's really no need to bring back the Wing Commander franchise. And it's not really going to wow me, whatever it is they would try to do. So, I mean, I love you, Wing Commander, and Chris Roberts, thank you so much for the wonderful franchise. Mark Hamill, thank you for all the wonderful acting scenes. You put your heart and soul into that like you did as Luke Skywalker. But, nah, I'm done. Sorry. Thank you. Now we'll turn it over to Mark for the final vote.
Stay dead.
There you have it, everybody. Good night.
Well, I mean, I wanted to give it a minute, but yeah. So, like, here's the thing. All right. What would Wing Commander do if it existed in this day and age? What would we do with a Wing Commander game? We don't need tactical dogfighting games, or we don't want them anymore as a genre, because, like, and I'm just talking, like, one-on-one against the AI, against the PC type games, like, not multiplayer stuff. I'll get into that in a minute. But, like, we don't want stuff like the original Wing Commander games, or like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, because if we wanted these games, they would exist. People would be making them.
Yep.
And, EA would be making them on some level or another, because they have the Star Wars license. We would be seeing these games, and we would be seeing more and more and more of them, because people would be clamoring for them. There is not a huge market for single player or small scale multiplayer dogfighting games in that particular genre, like in the particular marketplace. So we are not clamoring for a proper Wing Commander sequel. There is no value in that. So a sequel would not be helpful here. Okay, put that aside. For a spin-off, we fucking tried that already with Wing Commander Arena, and nobody liked it, and it wasn't very good. Like, I don't know where else you could necessarily take Wing Commander, but as a spin-off goes, there's not a lot of places you can take that would be particularly successful. You can't really take it in like a privateer type direction because that shit already exists, and a lot of people are already playing those kinds of games now. You know, EVE Online, Elite Dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
Privateer is still a thing that people are screwing around with now and again.
HD retextures.
Right, exactly. And, you know, as we said, Star Citizen is a thing that people are playing and that exists. If you want that kind of game, it's already there, and it's already sold to whatever the marketplace is going to be for these games. There's not a huge market for people who want to have these games. This isn't a Call of Duty grade franchise, or a Call of Duty grade genre, I should say, that can bear 10 different active games with people playing them. It's there's a limited amount of people, there's a limited amount of bodies that are going to be investing in this. Start Over kind of again falls into those categories. It falls in the same area. It's like, what would you do with a revitalized, rebooted Wing Commander? There are franchises that you can absolutely start over with and completely reimagine from the ground up. Wing Commander is going to be a very specific style of game, or it's going to be adjacent to a specific style of game, no matter what you do with it. Like, the most that you can do with it, if you're not going to make it what it is right now, is make it an Ace Combat sort of thing, which the market for that is already fucking cornered by Ace Combat. There are not lots of people clamoring for a new Ace Combat or somebody to be a challenger to the throne of that genre. You could make it some type of a shoot 'em up game, but I mean, shoot 'em ups have never been a dominant popular genre. You know, I love me some Gradius, I love me some R-Type. They're not fucking popular games. What would you do with a Wing Commander game if you decided to start the whole franchise over again, aside from being more fucking Wing Commander, which we have already established is not an especially popular genre? Like, don't get me wrong, I think Wing Commander was, fine at the time. I was always more of an X-Wing or a TIE Fighter person myself, but I thought that what those games did was fine. But at the end of the day, Wing Commander as a franchise has had its time come and go. If there was a position that it could occupy now, it's already being occupied by other games and other developers. There's no room for Wing Commander to step in and be something at this point. So, just let it stay dead. Let it die in peace.
Unless there's some kind of void that suddenly becomes apparent and people are actually clamoring for this, I see no reason for Wing Commander to come back at all. Even if that were the case, I absolutely agree with everything you just said. So, and with that, we have 2 votes for Stay Dead, 1 vote for Starting Over. And, well, actually, is Wing Commander on GOG or Steam, Mark?
Origin.
Probably Origin, yeah. If it's anywhere.
Origin. It is
Yeah,
still owned by EA.
Yeah, because EA did buy Orion, and Orion got shut down, which is a shame. But typical of EA. So, with that...
Only kinda.
Only kinda. I mean, how many studios have they shut down after purchasing them?
All of them?
All but 1, 2. All but 2.
They have a great track record, don't they?
BioWare is going to be taken to a farm eventually.
Yeah.
They'll be put out to pasture soon enough. As unfortunate as that sounds.
The only one they'll never shut down is Maxis, because The Sims is still a thing that people like to play a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They've already basically all but shut down Maxis. Like, the name exists, but it's
It's like we were
fucking
talking about with
it's
Game
wearing
Informer.
it's EA wearing a Maxis skin suit. It's
Ooh.
would you fuck me? I'd fuck me so hard type situation.
It's
Yeah,
just
no,
like
you're not wrong.
EA is straight up Buffalo Billing Maxis at this point.
Jesus, that's awful.
just like they Buffalo billed.
It's not wrong. I can
guys-
immediately imagine
yeah.
EA walking through the hall with its balls tucked up, like just dancing around.
Oh my god. You're not. I mean, see, like, I get it. I do. You're not wrong. It's awful, but you're not wrong. That's horrible. I don't need that in my life. I'm not going to bed tonight. Thanks.
Okay. And with that, we're going to end the show. So before we end the show, however, let's see what is going on in everyone's life right now. Mark, what do you got going on, and any stream shows coming up?
Well, I have started doing Friday streams again, so hopefully that will be a consistent thing that will continue happening. We are playing Alpha Protocol on streams pretty consistently, and I'm actually making some decent progress with it, which is nice. And last Saturday, we did a board game night stream, so this Saturday we'll be back to regular video gaming. I don't really know what we're going to play, but we'll figure it out when the time comes. That's about all I got right now.
And how about you, Jan? What do you got going on?
What do I have going on? Absolutely nothing right now.
Still haven't been able to get things going?
Well, so a lot of it was mostly just last week was really clunky for me, but should be better this week. I am aiming towards trying to do 1 or 2 streams this week. I have no idea when specifically yet because I pretty much had to wait until today to find out what was going on with paperwork for my work from home gig. So that's a thing. Now that that's taken care of, I'm pretty much open for the rest of the week. So
that's good.
I'll probably get at least 1 or 2 streams in. I'm back in the Tekken grind again, and 14 is really all I've been playing right now. So it's kind of like,
hey Jan, you should join me on some Monster Hunter later, so we can get ready for Iceborne.
PS4.
Either way, PS4 or PC.
Well, PC is not getting Iceborne until January, so it'd have to be PS4.
Okay, well then that's fine because I'm trying to work towards getting a good longsword armor set, but I might switch over to Gunlance because I'm really I know it seems like the majority of all the builds now either use a combination
Behemoth with Nirgi or it's either Behemoth with Nirgi or Behemoth with eye patch. That's pretty much it.
Well, it's either Behemoth with those or Behemoth mixed with Arch-Tempered Teostra, like Gamma, or
for Archer,
or a combination of Kolva like armor sets or weapon sets.
Like all the Zero stuff.
Yeah,
the Kolva stuff is for heavy bow gun and hammer.
Okay, and I do use hammer, but on the Xbox and PC I use it. Well, anyway, but yeah, going on for me. Yeah, Mondays. I'm still streaming Monster Hunter Mondays. For the time being, I'm now back on World. I'm playing with a friend on the Xbox. Yay. And I'll be bouncing back and forth between PS4 and PC eventually. I want to get caught up with, getting ready for Iceborne when it comes out in only a few weeks. Tuesdays, I mean, like I said, we're doing this weekly leading up to September 10th. Which is the 20th anniversary of the Dreamcast launching in the United States. We are still in the midst of planning something. We're probably going to do it somewhat similar to what we did on the Doom 25th anniversary show back in December. So please, tune in, tell your friends. Troll us, I don't care. We'll have fun. And,
yeah, I haven't had to ban anybody this stream.
Yes. I guess that's progress.
Yeah, I mean, it's welcome, but, I'm definitely ready, so if you want to be a douche.
Now's the time!
And on Wednesdays, my stream night is still open. I might play some more Monster Hunter tomorrow. I might play some Doom Episode 5, Seagull, which is, hey, good job, Carmack. Romero. That's some good shit right there. That's some tough shit right there.
Can I, just as a closing, can I say props to Bethesda for actually doing something good recently?
What's that?
They turned off the need for you to actually log into your Bethesda Net account to actually, if you lost.
Oh yeah, for Doom.
for Doom, the re-releases of Doom and Doom 2,
Yeah.
they turn off the need for you to you can actually bypass that login now, so you don't have to worry about the DRM for, a game that's basically been free for 25 years.
Yeah. I think that was the one time they actually made a genuine error while releasing that. I don't think that was intended.
Oh yeah, it was.
Are you sure?
But
I'm
Oh, yeah.
positive. I'm positive it was intentional.
it was definitely intentional, and when enough people raised enough of a stink, Bethesda went, okay, fine, you can have your free Doom. I don't know why you guys aren't playing 2016, this is better, but okay, you can have your original Doom.
Because
It's like,
fucking not.
bruh.
Doom 2016 is great.
Look, I'm not saying that it's not.
Look, I'm
good.
not saying that it's not great, but
Why are
the
you
original
DRMing
Doom
a
is
game
fucking
for free?
rad as shit.
Yeah,
Oh,
why are you
yeah.
DRMing a game that's been free for 25 years? Let's talk about.
And
scumbag
no. What
tactics.
pisses me off is that they removed Doom 1 and Doom 2, the Xbox Live Arcade versions, and replaced them with the ones they have currently. But however, I already have them installed on my Xbox 360, so yeah, good luck trying to remove those, buddy.
People have that game installed on their refrigerators. It's just okay.
I know. Anyway, we're going to turn this over. We're going to rate a friend of mine who is playing Monster Hunter, my boy Sadosha. So I want to thank everybody here for tuning in. We will be streaming again, like I said, next Tuesday, the 27th. So please join us once again every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here, this same channel, same bet time. That didn't work.
We're the fucking Ultimate Warrior now.
Yeah.
Swing and a miss.
Swing and a miss indeed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, y'all have a good night. Toodles.